Thank you so much, Chairman. I so appreciate this hearing because credit scoring has been something that impacts my community directly as one of is the third poorest congressional district in the country. You know, Mr. Greer, would you agree that racism is profitable? So I would like,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I would like to submit for the record, Mr. Chair, a great op-ed from Rashad Robinson that says corporations profit off of racism into the record, if I may.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Greer, you talk about oppression economy in your testimony, and I think that's really powerful because what we're hearing is words that corporations use, risk-based pricing, assessments, as we all continue to hear these kinds of really interesting terminologies. But I can tell you personally, auto insurance, for instance, rates in my state is the highest in the nation. People will say it's all these other different factors, but credit scores are actually used to calculate people's, whether or not they're a safe driver, credit scores. So when we talk about structural racism and talk about this hearing, we have to really talk about the human impact of what this means, right? They're selling our data, the credit scoring agencies for profit, to auto insurance agencies that are using non-driving factors as proxies, marriage, whether or not you're married, whether or not your education level, all these things, again, has nothing to do whether or not you are a safe driver, but they'll use words like risk-based pricing or assessments. So, Mr. Greer, I mean, when you think about those kinds of measures of using these as proxies, and I'm talking specifically about the auto insurance industry, right, the use of credit scores, how has that really impacted communities of color?
Right. So what this, you know, I'm really thankful for all the work that you do, Ms. Tlaib, not just for the people in your district, but the people of color across the country. But this idea is to create a class of people who can be exploited, who can have their auto insurance be much larger than it would be in another part of the country, or if they're another type of person, you know. So the reason why and I think this has been documented that auto insurance is higher in your community is because it's largely Black, Latino, and Arab American people that are living in your community, and that because our economy has been built on a system that exploits racism as a way to draw profits, this is how that plays out in that sector.
Mr. Hejaz, do you know what credit scoring has to do with driving records?
It has nothing to do with driving record. Credit scores and reports, in my view, should only be used to assess creditworthiness, and as a general rule, should not be expanded beyond that.
Yeah. Ms. Trav, it's interesting. When somebody's credit score is lower and they use it towards calculating their auto insurance, do you know their auto insurance rates actually goes higher? So if you're poor, you're paying higher rates, even though you're a safer driver. Did you know, Ms. Trav, that if you had a DUI, but a better credit score, you were paying less than an auto insurance than somebody that has no DUI record, but a lower credit score? Did you know that?
That's correct, Congresswoman, and it's terribly unfair.
That's a form of structural racism. If you look at who's impacted, it is communities that are low income. So I want to get to our next thing, which is medical debt. You know, Ms. Wu, you know how passionate I am. I don't want medical debt to be used similar to as if you bought a car and you missed a payment. This is basically, you're sick, you have to get, this is medically necessary debt, and it ends up on your credit report for years. Given the credit reporting agency's poor track record, you know, what kinds of things that your organization is doing to expose the fact that medical debt and our credit reports actually impacts or expands economic disparities in communities like mine?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you for your passion on this particular topic. The proposal you had that medically necessary debt should not show up on credit reports is one of the most important aspects of the Comprehensive Credit Act. You know, the CFPB has found over half, it's up to 58% of debt collection items, third-party debt collection items on credit reports is for medical debt. It's a massive amount. And, you know, COVID-19 really exposes how not only this is just a terrible, unjust problem, but it's also runs along racial lines, because we know Black and Brown Americans have suffered under COVID-19 more. And New York Times has documented how COVID-19 has resulted in these huge medical bills for some of the patients. And then this stuff ends up on their credit reports. It's just it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Mr. Chair, if I may, you know, we are pushing for legislation, hopefully you all can take a look at it, of reducing markings on credit report from 7 to 4 years. I know it's a good compromise. Of course, I don't want the credit reports being used, but I think moving it from 7 to 4 years can dramatically really help our communities. But right now, I think this hearing was critically important to expose at least.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Yeah. Thank you.
The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Timmons, is recognized.